top stories, Ethiopian Human Rights Commission calls on the UN Human Rights Council to respect joint recommendations. And scholar calls on Ethiopians to stand in unison to revive the nation's economy. Hello and many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. The House of People's Representatives held its third regular session today over national dialogue. The House of People's Representatives has ratified the bill by the Constitutional Inquiry for the Way Forward. The nationwide dialogue is set to bring together the various political interests in the country. The main organizer of the dialogue, Multi-Stakeholder Initiative for National Dialogue, MIND, has so far said that a clear date for the start of the dialogue is instrumental for the cause, which some recommend would have paramount importance for the peace and stability of the country. President Sahle-Work Zewde has arrived in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire for a two-day working visit in West Africa. In Abidjan, the president is set to discuss on current situations in Ethiopia and to strengthen the bilateral relations with Côte d'Ivoire. She will meet the Ethiopian community as well as the officials of the African Development Bank. Côte d'Ivoire, a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council, has not voted in favor of the conference to be held on human rights situation in Ethiopia on Friday. At a time when Ethiopia is dreadfully seeking a partnership with African countries to counter the pressure from some Western countries, the president is expected to explain the reality of Ethiopia on the ground during her stay with her counterpart. It is expected that Ethiopia will continue to receive full support and cooperation from Côte d'Ivoire based on Ethiopia's reputation all over the continent. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia called on ambassadors of African countries in Addis Ababa to protest the UN Human Rights Council's call to hold a special session on Ethiopia. The call is politically motivated and ignores all the Ethiopian government's commitment to applying the recommendations of the joint UN EHRC investigative report on the alleged human rights abuses in Tigray. The Director General of Neighboring Countries and IGAD Affairs at the Ministry, Ambassador Fisaha Shawel, and the Director General for International Organizations, Yosef Kassiye, made the call during their discussion with African ambassadors on Wednesday. Africans should continue to be committed to the principle of delivering African solutions to African problems. The planned UN Human Rights Council special session is undesirable and provides a safe haven for terrorist TPLF through denying the truth. The Ethio-American political science and international relations professor Brook Hailu Beshah made this remark via a Zoom interview with ETV English. He also said the council has uttered silence to the atrocities committed by the terrorist TPLF against innocent civilians in Amhara and Afar states.
Over the last 27 years, terrorist TPLF group had committed gross human rights abuse, massacres, ethnic violences, and openly looted the country's resources with the aim of dismantling Ethiopia. Its treasonous attack to the Ethiopian Northern Command on November 3, 2020 was a good testimony for this devilish strategy. Since then, TPLF has been continuing its unjustifiable destruction of human lives and properties in the Amhara and Afar regions.
When the TPLF began to invaded the Amhara region and the Afar region, we know that purposely they targeted what? Civilian targets, towns, cities, burned and looted hospitals, looted schools, looted universities, tore up everything. Industrial centers like Kombolcha Industrial Park. It was totally dismantled, settled, and taken back to the north, to Tigray province. And also countless rapes of young girls. And even lately, last week, as one follows in the media, I believe a 72 or a 75-year-old nun. Can you imagine? You know, women being raped in front of their husbands, mothers being raped in front of their 10, 12, 14-year-old sons and daughters and mothers being raped. All this is being committed by the TPLF. And rather than focus on this group, which is anti-social, anti-Ethiopia, anti-human, rather than focus on this group, which, by the way, pretends, you know, to bring democracy by getting rid of the Ethiopian government, to bring democracy to the Ethiopian people, as if we don't know the behavior of TPLF. We know it for the last 27, 30 years, how they behave.
However, Western countries and their media outlets have not been trying to condemn TPLF atrocities. Rather, they have continued to misinform the public and tarnish the image of Ethiopia. Surprisingly, the UN Human Rights Council called a session to establish a team that investigates atrocities happened in Ethiopia. That was rejection of the joint investigation by AHRC, Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, and the UN Human Rights Council. Hence, Besha says the planned UN Human Rights Council special session is undesirable.
This is really sad and wrongly placed, because the accusation should have been directed to the default old guard, the old TPLF organization. Of course, they are not a state. They pretend to be a state. They are not a state, but they should have been the ones who should have been accused. So it is really sad that the United Nations Human Rights Council is now being manipulated. I repeat, manipulated, you know, to get back at Ethiopia, and being used by certain quarters and certain countries, you know, to get back at Ethiopia. This is really sad. What will be the consequence? Ethiopians are fighters. The truth is on our side. We will not kneel down. We will not succumb, whether in Ethiopia itself, Ethiopians, or wherever we live in the world. We'll not give up. We'll stand up for our rights.
He reiterates the planned UN Human Rights Council special session as regrettable and provides safe haven for terrorist TPLF through denying the truth.
The Honorable Senator Jim Inhofe, who has been vocal about Biden's biased policy hurting Ethiopia, stood once again for truth and Ethiopia. He has chided the Biden administration and the State Department for their dictatorial approach towards Africa rather than seeking mutually beneficial friendship. He says this has pushed many nations away from the USA. Ethiopia, which has been a close ally of the USA for a long time, is no exception. Take a listen to him.
One of my big criticisms of our State Department is that they tend to go around the world telling other countries what they need to do instead of focusing on building lasting friendships and alliances. This pushes countries away from us instead of bringing them toward us. And unfortunately, this is exactly what the Biden administration is doing in Ethiopia, because Ethiopia has been unable to resolve its internal challenges quick enough for the administration. They're punishing Ethiopia. They're really punishing the wrong people here. Most recently, this has been in the form of announcing that they plan to remove Ethiopia from the African Growth and Opportunity Act. The African Growth and Opportunity Act is known as AGOA, and it's something that's very significant. It's one that all those in Africa and other countries are they're trying to get behind them. And I think it's particularly significant right now that Christmas is upon us.
Senator Jim Inhofe also urged the Biden administration to take real steps to undo the sanctions against the democratically elected government of Ethiopia and roll back termination of African Growth and Opportunity Act AGOA benefits to the country.
Just after the Biden administration announced their plan to punish Ethiopia, the Chinese government announced their own plan to purchase $300 billion worth of goods from Africa over the next 3 years and to invest nearly $10 billion. Now, the Chinese foreign minister promptly visited the principals in Ethiopia to support Prime Minister Abiy. Now, Prime Minister Abiy, we might remember, has been a prime minister in Ethiopia for a long period of time. I can remember standing many years ago on this floor and lauding the virtues of him and what he has done for this country, and the fact that he is probably could be arguably the best educated prime minister in that country. The Biden administration should take real steps to undoing the sanctions against the democratically elected government of Ethiopia and roll back the termination of AGOA benefits. And that would make a much happier Christmas for us and for Ethiopia.
Accordingly, H.R. 4350, Section 6464, inserted by the House, has been removed by Senator Jim from the bill. This comes right after the meeting between EACC and the senator. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission calls on the UN Human Rights Council to support the implementation of the joint investigation recommendations and to encourage ongoing independent investigations in Ethiopia. In a letter addressed to the President of the United Nations Human Rights Council, HRC, Madame Najat Khan, and to members of the HRC as well as Michelle Bachelet, High Commissioner, Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, EHRC, said setting up a new body to investigate the entire period since 3rd November 2021 is repetitive, counterproductive to ongoing implementation processes and further delays redress for victims and survivors. Rather than repeating the same process, the letter said, the next step should have been rehabilitation, restitution, and compensation, as well as prosecution of the perpetrators. According to the letter, the proposal to set up a new investigative body would give parties to the conflict, which have not yet acknowledged responsibility and taken steps to implement the joint investigation team recommendations, an option to reject the report in light of new investigation. And it may have the effect of undermining the work and voice of independent human rights institutions such as the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission.
Today, Ethiopia is making significant strides in transforming its political, social, and economic landscape.
ኢትዮጵያና ሕዝቦቿን ይባርክ። አመሰግናለሁ።
አለፈ የሆነው ቢከብደንም አልፈናል ግድ ለማሁን የኋላን ወደ ኋላ ጥለን እንጀምር አብረን ተማምለን
We as Ethiopians in the diaspora possess an extraordinary amount of goodwill, resources, and skill sets to help our country tackle the broad range of social, economic, and political problems we face today. And please don't forget that we need you. Every single Ethiopian is deserving and is worthy of a great education, access to clean water, and living a life without poverty. Remember about the people on the other side of our giving.
Welcome back. You're watching Addis News Hour. The terrorist group has been used by some Western countries as a tool of foreign policy for personal gain, said Mustafa Mohammed, chief of Somali region. He said that the group's actions and its previous power in East Africa have now led to its mistaken view of itself. Johannes Fentahun has more.
The terrorist group TPLF, which obeys Western interests by putting aside Ethiopians' benefit during 27 years in power, has now led to a distorted view of itself.
For 27 years, it ruled not only Ethiopia, but also East Africa as a dictator. Because of this, it has a misconception that there is no ruler and no politician more than itself. As a result, it was not even good for the people of Tigray, and its downfall has worsened. This is what we are seeing now.
It's well-known fact that Western scholars have been urging Western countries to pursue foreign policy on the basis of their interests in Africa, Latin America, and Asia.
Robert Kapler has done a lot of research on United States foreign policy, has talked to a lot of ministers, and said Westerners think their interests come before values. They also think that foreign policy must be clean even from morality. They say anything that is good for them is right, and if it is not good for them, even it is immoral, it doesn't concern them. They still believe in this way.
During its tenure, the group has been instrumental in implementing this Western policy in East Africa. As a result, even serious human rights abuses were taking place only because the group was obedient to them. The Westerners passed the matter in silence.
Through this group and its leaders, the Americans, who had a strong desire to find an obedient group in the Horn of Africa, were succeeded. Although they have shown some modesty since Ethiopia's election '97, they have only been doing what the West says. That is why, when they were in power, even they were abusing Ethiopia, filling prisons. What was being said about was the economic growth and that the country was at peace.
Some groups, which are supported by Western governments, are trying to initiate ethnic-based conflict in Ethiopian Somali region.
In the Somali region, a number of American lobbyists and groups are writing articles, particularly on oil-related issues. These lobbyists are working to get help from the United States government by dealing with oil and to provoke various conflicts in the region. They are also trying to get help from the Egyptians. Our region has 11 zones, one of which is the Ogaden. While TPLF was in power, the Ogadens have been killed and abused by the group. Therefore, the Ogaden people have no reason to support the TPLF.
However, Mustafa pointed out that their action did not take into account the reality on the ground.
Ethiopians, people of Ethiopian origin, and Friends of Ethiopia in Den Haag, the Netherlands, have staged a peaceful demonstration on Wednesday as part of the hashtag No More movement. The demonstrators opposed economic and political pressures that some corners have continued to make Ethiopia give in to unfair demands. They have also condemned the substandard stories of some notable media outlets on Ethiopia that kept on circulating misinformation about the country and its government with malicious intent. Participants have also echoed the idea that proposes Africa to have a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. It is to be recalled that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has recently reaffirmed his resolve to stand by his African colleagues in their quest for a permanent seat for the continent at the UNSC. Minister for Democratization Zadig Abraha said the allegation over state of emergency mentioning citizens arrested arbitrarily is baseless. He reaffirmed that the Ethiopian government has come a long way to bring peace and stability despite TPLF's sick joke. Goshu Melisau has more.
What we want is peace.
Talking to the DW Conflict Zone program, Minister for Democratization Zadig Abraha said the allegation over a state of emergency, citizens arrested arbitrarily is baseless and correcting measures are being taken in the process.
We have introduced a state of emergency, and following that, there are people who are suspected of committing crime, and they are under the rule of law. They are being prosecuted, and in this process, there are wrongs here and there, and we are correcting them. We are taking, the result why, our own Human Rights Commission has become stronger. It is coming up, it is issuing this kind of reports, which is exposing even our wrongs. This is the result of the transparency, the result of accountability measures we have taken.
He reaffirmed that the Ethiopian government has come a long way to bring peace and stability despite the PLF rejected the ceasefire.
On June, we declared a unilateral ceasefire and withdrawn from Tigray. But TPLF said it was a sick joke. That's how our move for peace, our initiation for peace was welcome. We have a duty to protect our citizens. What we want is peace. We have been trying to secure peace through informal and formal means. But TPLF gave all these efforts a deaf ear. That's why we are here.
Zadig told DW that the terrorist TPLF committed unspeakable atrocities in Amhara and Afar states.
But what is TPLF doing? If you happen to go to a number of cities, liberal cities in Amhara region, cities are destroyed to ground zero. Women are raped. Farmers are robbed of their yields. Now it is occupying a number of cities in Amhara region and committing atrocities. That has to be stopped. We have a duty to protect our citizens.
Zadig noted that the Ethiopian government has shown commitment to ensure accountability and transparency over the accusation of human rights violation by government forces during the law enforcement operation in Tigray. Sadly, the journalist was one-sided while he asked the minister.
It's not only important that justice is done, but justice has to be...
The journalist has been quoting Tigray conflict as the war taking place in Afar, particularly in Amhara.
These people, they might have taken up foreign passports for a variety of reasons, but they are Ethiopians. So other than, for example, holding political office, we should be allowed to invest in Ethiopia in every sector. That would send a very powerful message. Also give incentives. A lot of Ethiopians, as I said, here in the United States, they have a lot of knowledge. They may not necessarily have a lot of financial capital, but they have knowledge capital. Give them incentives to move back to Ethiopia.
Resources that are available with the Ethiopian diaspora, many educated Ethiopian scholars and professionals, many Ethiopian businessmen and women.
So let them come and see, contributing the benefit.
ደምቆ የጋረደን አነፋፍቆ እስከ መቼ ተነጥላ ትኑር እናት ልጇን ጥላ የሰው ሐሳብ ከንቱ ምኞት አንዱን ሁለት ወገን አርጎ
A scholar at the Oromia State Civil Service University, Muluna Heda, called on Ethiopians to stand in unison to revive the nation's economy, disrupted by the TPLF in Afar and Amhara regional states. Kazahun Chani has this report.
It is known that intensive lobbying to harbour Ethiopia continues. For instance, the recent calls to evacuate soon fell. Now some corners are lobbying for relocating conferences destined to be held in Addis Ababa. This regard, some forces are pushing to relocate conferences in Addis Ababa. The same entities are trying to relocate the African Union Summit that will be held in Addis Ababa in 2022. Following this, in an exclusive interview with BBC English, Dr. Muluna Heda, scholar at Oromia State University, disclosed that any tendencies that the Western countries and the international community is an interest that indicate the economic influence, citing the wrong motives of Ethiopia are more political than an issue of the economy.
All African leaders, they come here and they stay for suppose a maximum of a week or so, and they use different kind of service and everything. But the point is it will have its own impact on our economy. But what they are hoping is not as such our economy, but they want to I feel that it's more political than an issue of economy. And the thing is, that's all they want, and particularly what they want is creating a very weak Ethiopia. Isn't it? That's why they are supporting TPLF, doing all this kind of genocide currently in Afar and Amhara region. It may have economic impact, but it may not be as such significant because they stay here for a brief moment of time.
The TPLF is destroying the social and economic and other sectors, the scholar said. I think the only solution should be financing the economy to revive it soon. And concerning this, one or two tackled the increase of fuel price before hovering across the nation.
We have to finance this war, not only war, but we have to rehabilitate different hospitals, education, and other economic sectors that have been destroyed in areas that have been occupied by TPLF for the past 3 or so months. So that requires everyone, every citizen in our country, and those we have at diaspora, to share the pain. So this is, we will come over it very sooner than later. We'll come over it. But war is a painful thing, and as everyone knows, it will impact our economy. And this current price increase on oil is part of that one. And the thing is, it is a little bit painful, not so. I feel that. But again, it is meant to finance the establishment of those who has been displaced by the war, and those economic sectors that has been distracted, completely destroyed by that of TPLF.
Solutions for all these problems are standing in unison and ending the war in the shortest time possible, as to the scholar.
Colorful Cape Town is one of the most multiracial cities in the world. The city sits on South Africa's Cape Peninsula, where the waters of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans converge, and spectacular mountains tumble towards the sea. For decades, Cape Town has been buffeted too by the crosswinds of social upheaval. But just like those early ships, Cape Town had endured some of history's most turbulent waters and set course to an optimistic future. Cape Town's central area is situated in the City Bowl. This amphitheater-shaped area begins at the edge of Table Bay and is backed by the iconic 2-mile-long plateau of Table Mountain. Post-apartheid South Africa is often called the Rainbow Nation, and like a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, diversity, transformation, and creativity shines out from the city's downtown streets, from its businesses, from its very walls. So come and savor the colors, hope, and freedom of Cape Town.
And finally, the United Nations Cultural Agency UNESCO on Wednesday added Senegal's national dish, a rice and fish platter called thieboudin, to its cultural heritage list. Senegal's Culture Ministry applied to include the dish, which is widely consumed in the West African country, on the Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity list in October. Thieboudin means rice with fish in Senegal's dominant Wolof language. It is often prepared with vegetables such as cassava or tomato and served at lunch. The northern Senegalese city of Saint-Louis is believed to be the birthplace of the dish. The city, whose old center is itself a UNESCO World Heritage Site, borders the Atlantic Ocean and hosts a thriving fishing community. You're watching Addis News Hour, a quick reminder of the day's headlines. Ethiopian Human Rights Commission calls on the UN Human Rights Council to respect joint recommendations. And scholar calls on Ethiopians to stand in unison to revive the nation's economy. And that's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night and take care.